Hi, thanks so much for the introduction. Before I begin my paper, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I'm recording from, which is the lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation. Pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respects to any First Nations people who may be listening in today. I'd also like to thank Genevieve and her team for allowing us to still present our paper, even though I'm sitting over in Portugal at the International Easy to Read conference and possibly almost at the same moment during the opening plenary. So thank you so much to your team for being able to share this really important message with your community. What we want to talk to you about is the implications of low literacy at all stages of emergencies, the numbers of people that includes, and strategy for managing that very challenging issue for people in our community. So who are we? We're actually a virtual team. We do have a few of our staff in Melbourne. We're Australian based, but we have done some work internationally and we collaborate internationally with practitioners around the world. And when I first set the business up, what I was actually wanting to do was to make sure that we were at the forefront of creating best practice, meaningful, easy English that meets the needs of the intended reader, and the intended reader being people with really low literacy skills. Last year, our team were acknowledged both nationally and internationally, and these are just two of our awards that we received last year for the work that we do in easy English and recognising that people with low literacy are able to effectively use the information to make decisions and make choices about what they're doing. So I encourage you to come round and have a look at our beautiful award and our certificates. Where do I want to start? So I want to start with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Some of you may have heard of it, some may not. There are four parts to the convention, which I want to draw your attention to, in thinking that there are, you need to be able to communicate to be able to then have all those other articles being met. And there's these four here, Article 2, Article 9, 12 and 21. But really critically in the world of emergencies is Article 11. I also encourage you to go and look at, which is literally labelled emergencies. I do want to just expand though on Article 21 for you. So in light of the work that we do, this is written keeping that in mind. So rather than calling it an article, which is a legal term, we call it Part 21. So Part 21 is the right to information and the right to speak up. And you have the right to say what you think. But it's difficult to say what you think if you actually don't know what information is out there and what the choices are. You have a right to information in a way that you can understand. And you can see there's a range of different ways that people need to have access. We're going to focus specifically on the second last one, easy words and pictures. But keep in mind that once you have easy words and pictures, you can then translate into all these other things as well. And just because you need sign doesn't mean that you actually have literacy at the highest, most complex level. And in fact, we know that people who use Auslan as their first language, there's a significantly high number of them that have very low literacy because reading for them is a second language. It also says you get information at the same time as other people, so planning for it and creating it in those access needs. It also talks about you have the right to access other ways to talk. So if you have difficulty talking, that you have the right to access these things. And then there's all that technology, and people have the right to access it. And it's our job as services to make sure that people have it. You can't expect that someone with low literacy who's perhaps hiding it from the rest of the community is going to come to you and say, oh, by the way, I want to have something that I can read and understand. We need to be a bit more preemptive than that. So I did a bit of a look around to see, well, what do you expect me as a consumer of emergency information, either in the planning, the during and the after? What do you expect me to be able to read? Well, let's have a bit of a look. So lots of it on the internet. We've got social media and lots of text messages. Maps are a big thing. And maps assume that we know things like north, south, east, and west, that we can estimate distance, that we know directions, and that we know where things are in relation to each other. That we know about the different types of warnings that are out there. Now, it may have been created for a different audience. The one on the right is for First Nations people, but we still need to be able to read it. Different sorts of flood warnings. And then you're asking us to plan for, and the different options depending on where we live, the time of year, sort of issues that are going on, the sort of emergency, what to do in an emergency. Other emergencies are around, CPR. So being able to read a fact sheet all about CPR. What is CPR? What does that stand for? And then there's this other one, which is actually another first aid fact sheet. It's called vertigo. In brackets, it's saying dizziness. It's interesting. It's taken the everyday word. It's put it into the heading. Why do we have to use that complex word in the first place, vertigo? Not sure. It's a medical term. Do we really need to know it? More new emergency warnings. Don't forget, our checklist, what we're taking from the house, part of our planning. Don't forget your smoke alarm, big long brochure about how you do it, how often to check it, where it goes. And then we have things like being out on the farm. What are the things that you need to plan for in the heat of the summer? Or what are the issues when it's flooded? Campfires. Thinking about, where you can have them, when you're allowed to have them, and how to make sure you put them out correctly. There's so much stuff out there. And then, of course, we've got during and after, the issues around mental health. Lots of text written here. And there's another great one here too. You've got a fact sheet on insurance. Insurance information fact sheet. Oh, that's right. Now I have to go and read my insurance papers or find out, how do I get hold of my policy document when in fact maybe it's been lost. And that's all the customer, client, public facing content. But what about internally as well? So you might be okay out in the sheds, but we've got lots of paperwork here as well. And so this one's here on respectful, inclusive workplace. But what about all the work safe things? All the things we have to learn about being safe in all the different emergencies when we're training and when we're just back in the office or we're back in the sheds cleaning up after an emergency. Wouldn't it be great if that was all just written in a really simple, easy to read way? So I want you to think about access to emergency information. It's not about a reading test and writing things in the most complex way possible, but in the easiest way possible. So that not just you and I who might be a bit stressed and say our literacy is not so great as normal, but all those with low literacy can also access it. So who are these people? How many of them are there? Well, let's have a look at the data. So this is a piece of data that has been collected and run via the OECD, and the lead agency was Statistics Canada. So in Australia, the Australian Bureau of Statistics were involved in this. It's 16 to 65s, looking at literacy and the range of literacy skills that are out in our community. And there was enough data collected to extrapolate to the whole community. What you need to recognise is there's a whole lot of people that are missing from this data. First of all, there's no First Nations people at all in the, not all First Nations, rural and remote First Nations people are not in the data. Also, it doesn't include people living in institutions, so people in prisons, people who, perhaps young people in nursing home care, people who live in disability group homes, people in forensic units, hospitals, all those sorts of things. So let's have a look at the one on the right. And you will see that it says 2013, so it seems quite old. Because what happened, they did 3 versions of this, and the last one that you don't see the graph of is 1996. And at the time, it was thought we don't need to do it again. And all the countries said, no, we need to redo it. And of course, in that planning of the next thing, when they said they weren't going to do it, well, the pandemics happened. And so they're in the process now of collecting the new piece of data. But I don't really expect it to look any different like this. Maybe the next time round, it might in fact even look worse because of what's happened with those young people coming out of school. So let's have a look at the blue bit across on the right-hand side of the right graph. It says level 4-5. So level 5 is such a small number of people in the community that's usually combined with 5. Level 5 are people who can read complex legal information without having to read and reread it again. And it's less than 3% of the population. The next group are people who have completed a 4-year university degree. That's not TAFE, it's not diploma, it's a 4-year university degree. And what you have to remember is most public information is actually written by that group of people. And they assume that everyone else has got literacy just like them because their peers seem to have literacy just like them. So the rest of the community must as well. In fact, that's not the case. In fact, you can see that that group's quite a low proportion of our total community. The black group is 40% of our population. This group of people is described as being able to manage what we call plain language. Plain language is average year 9, 15-year-old reader, average year 9 to sort of not so great year 9 reader maybe. But what we're looking at is adult content. So those two groups make up 56% of the adult Australian population. And what the data summary says is that these two groups, their literacy is at a level that they can manage a range of day-to-day reading tasks, which leaves 44%, plus all those people that aren't included, who do not have the literacy to manage a range of day-to-day reading tasks. So you've got 30% in the green. If you give them a simple paragraph on a topic that they know, using short sentences, they'll be okay. Dropping down to the orange, that if you give them a very short, simple sentence using words they know on a topic that they know about, they'll be okay. Dropping down to the grey, which they struggle to know the letters A to Z, struggle to fill in a form, and basically don't have any literacy at all. So it's fairly significant. So I encourage you to think and reflect on that data and think about who are the people out in your community who might be struggling and what that sort of person may be doing to hide their literacy. And I'm sure Kath and Julie will be able to share some examples back at the booth about those, who some of those people might be as well. That data, you needed to think that, so let's just go back a step. The data here, if English is your second language and you've been in the country a number of years, basically increase it by 10%. So instead of being 44, it's 54%. But what I want to just quickly show you is what happened across the breadth of all these communities. So eventually there were 36 countries involved in this data collection. Here's Australia in the big orange. We're at 44 in the green. But what I particularly want you to note is the graphs up here on the right-hand side. So Germany, France, so France is at 57, Spain is higher, and Italy at 70%. 70% of the adult Italian population do not have the literacy to manage a range of day-to-day reading tasks. Earlier this year, I had the pleasure of going to the UN in Vienna, and I reworked this graph for just European countries. And there was not one country that had less than 50% of people. So every country was at least like Germany, and many of them were much higher, like France and Spain and Italy. For example, Turkey is up at 85%. So what does that mean for our communities here in Australia? Is that if you're translating complex information into a second language, is no guarantee that it's actually meeting the needs of your audience, because it's unlikely that that person is constantly still reading or even had that reading level in their first language. So this is why Easy English is really valuable, because if we turn something into Easy English, what it means is that we're using very simple language, we're still doing adult topics, and it's more, first of all, it's more likely to be translated accurately, but secondly, it might be actually at a level that that person can read in their first language as well. Got to keep thinking, how much practice does someone have reading in their first language and what sort of things? So what we've been talking about is reading, but another part of literacy is what we call numerical literacy. So numbers is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but numerical literacy is about how you apply numbers to what you do. And so particularly around emergencies, there's lots of things that come up around number. We talk about direction, we talk about height, we talk about speed, we talk about not just speed, but distance. And then we talk about kilometres per hour. We talk about numbers of people. There's numbers everywhere. And even to plan things about when you stop and when you go and what roads to take. And should I go north, south, east or west? It's all number. So where we were at 44%, what I want you to think about, 10% more. It's 53%. Okay. And then if English is your second language, keep adding that 10% again. But what's really interesting when you look at that additional 10%, it's not that they're sliding from the most complex to plain. It's actually those people who are going from plain, and now we're at the most disadvantaged groups of them. So when English is your second language, you've got lots and lots of people in that orange and grey area for both reading and for number literacy. So what are some of the things we do? We always think about who the audience needs are, not what the corporate audience is that coming from head office. It's about what it is that people use, what words do people use out in their community. Because if they don't use those corporate words, they're unlikely to use them. Or if they don't hear them, they're not going to use them on a regular basis. They don't understand them. So they're not going to recognize them in words. So we must find the words that our audience use. We aim for sentences of 5 to 8 words in easy English. And we use really short words. So we talk about them having just one syllable. So a one syllable word is like short. Another one syllable word is words. Sentence is 2 syllables. Sentence. Audience is 3. Audience. So we're going to not use any words like that. Yes, we do have to use some 2 syllable words, but every time we're trying to find a 1 syllable word in those short sentences. And we're aiming for an average grade 2 reading level. So it's adult content, adult information, but it's grade 2 reading level. So what I want to do is just show you some examples of what this looks like. So first of all, here's an example of an original. So this is Department of Regional New South Wales, their original piece of work that we were given on the floods and what happened in their Resilient Homes fund. So there were 13 pages that looked just like this. What did they end up like this? Oh my goodness, there's pictures. It's okay, we like pictures. And it was printed out. It was in a folder. And there were 13 fact sheets, 13 short topics that we then were able to describe. And because they were then in short fact sheets, we could actually then suggest that it gets personalised for individuals. And so if there were certain topics people didn't really need to know, we could take them from the main part of the folder, either throw them out if people really don't want them, or they could be tucked away in the back so that they're still there if they want them. And this is what it looks like on the inside. Lots of white space, very few sentences, and supported with images that reflect the text. They're not marketing pictures, they're very specific chosen images. We've done a number of reports now from people with disability on emergencies, and it's well worthwhile reading it, and read it in the easy English because it's much faster and much clearer. But basically what they're saying is include us in all those conversations around planning, because we're out in the community and we know what help we need to get into a car or out of a car. You know, how much time we need to get out of bed, out of the house. So you need to know who those people are. Go and chat to them. Please include us, they said. Invite us to meetings. Invite us in easy English so we know that meeting's on. Many of them say we don't even know there's a meeting on. COVID-19, huge emergency. Not surprisingly, at this stage, well, it's very sad really, that there was no planning around how to get information out for people with low literacy. And so what we actually did across 6 months in 2020 was develop 120 fact sheets pro bono because it was not out there in the community. And we got lots of wonderful feedback from lots of people about what it was that they appreciated and what they needed. And we got, requests for what else people wanted. But also thinking about not just directions, but also instructions about things like how to use a mask. What's PPE? I mean, we seem to all know what it is now, but back when those words were first used, no one seemed to know what. I didn't. Needed to have a fact sheet on what is PPE. Don't assume people know this stuff. You can see that we had rules, lots of rules for lots of things, and there's the map. And we had to include the map of Australia and show where Victoria was in it. Why? Because people couldn't tell you. And in fact, at one stage, I tried just putting a map of Victoria up, and someone sent a message back to me via their provider saying, "What's that funny blue thing on the front of that booklet? Don't know what that funny blue rectangle is. Sorry, not rectangle, triangle is." And I've gone, "Oh, okay. We still need to put the map up of Australia." Newsletters are really important. So this is operating a bit like a magazine, this Parramatta City Council. So there's their contents list. And here's just an example of what we did for creating their theatre setup. So, you know, times and dates, those sorts of things. And a phone call, a phone number to ring. Brochures are A4 bifold, has less content in them, but it covers what people need. Surveys are really important, and every option has an image so that people know which one they're choosing. This is e-Safety Commissioner, and just an example of, once again, you can't assume. So this was about online abuse. When we took it out to consumers, recognising, in fact, the consumers didn't know what that phrase online abuse was. And so we had to go back and explain it. And I just want to finish with thinking about the internet, because everything seems to go out there or on social media. And if 44% of people struggle with their literacy, there's at least that number who struggle even more. And we know that only 2 in 5 people can use complex websites effectively. So we need to really rethink what we're doing. And you're going to ask, and who are those people? They're always the really vulnerable ones. So this is some data from the Australian Communication Media Authority, and just to highlight that these groups of people, so not in the labour force, Indigenous Australians, household low incomes, people with disability, less than secondary education, household income, 65 pluses, all are people who are unable to use the internet effectively. And right as the least effective are those who only have a mobile phone. It is 4 million people in Australia. What do they use mobile phones for? Social media, lots of videos, TikTok, you know, it's all just pictures and photos. On top of that, there is another 2.5 million people who do not access the internet. So we must be planning for these people in what we do. I encourage you to go and have a look at Bumpy Road, which is an example of a website we're involved in creating that has one-step navigation for those who perhaps can get onto a website. And this is what we're planning towards, so that if we've got an organisation who's got really complex website, yes, hopefully at some point they will be able to get something simpler, but they've done some great easy English with us. Let's get it out there so that people can find it. So my big message to you around the internet and social media is print it out, have it available in the community, and plan to post it out to some people. So come and chat to Kath and Julie, ask them some questions, hear about the stories about what happens when we talk to people about easy English, get some ideas for what you need, and see what other people have done. And thank you so much for your time. And once again, thanks to Genevieve and her team for allowing us to do a pre-recording. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Please get in contact. I'm going to be still accessing my email while I'm overseas, or Julie and Kath, and love to hear from you, and I'd love to hear how the conference has gone. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.